Are there any changes, or have they just changed the letter? Now, it's been almost 2 years since I dropped my video on the regular Honor X6. You can check that video out down in the description below. But I thought I'd check out the Honor X6b. This is one of Honor's cheapest phones in their lineup, of course, if you exclude second-hand models off eBay. But it does share a lot of similarities with the regular Honor X6, but it does improve on a couple of things here and there. So let's check it out. So if we first talk about one of the areas that is very similar to the regular Honor X6, and that is this display. It's a 6.5-inch TFT LCD display, but the refresh rate has been boosted to a 90Hz refresh rate over the standard 60Hz on the regular Honor X6. And overall, the display is a decent one. It's a 720p panel, so it's not 1080p or anything like that. But you do get a nice, sharp enough display on that slightly smaller 6.5-inch display, as opposed to 6.7, 6.8 inches on other phones today. You do get the larger chin at the bottom, which was found on that phone as well, and that is very common, of course, in budget phones. And then you do get slightly thicker bezels around the outside of the display, and then you get a teardrop notch at the top, which houses the relatively low resolution 5-megapixel selfie camera. Overall, I found the display of the Honor X6b to be absolutely fine. It tops out at just under 800 nits. Of course, it's not a particularly bright display, but I found it to be absolutely fine in my use, even using the phone outdoors. And then when it comes to the rest of the design, it's very similar again to the Honor X6. You've got some nice flat edges around the sides of the phone, and then you've got a plastic back. Of course, the whole design of the phone is made of plastic, and then you get that usual square camera layout in the top left-hand corner, which houses a 50-megapixel main camera and then just a 2-megapixel depth camera. The other two circles are the LED flash and what looks to be just an aperture logo, and then you've just got a little bit of AI branding at the bottom as well, and then Honor's branding at the bottom as well. You do get a 3.5mm headphone jack on the Honor X6b, so for those old school folk that like to use wired headphones, you'll be set with this phone. And then you just get a USB-C charging port, which supports 35-watt fast charging, a speaker grill and microphone at the bottom. On the right of the phone, you have your power button with integrated fingerprint scanner, and then your volume rockers just above that. At the top, you have another microphone, and then on the left, you have your SIM tray, which of course houses your SIM card and then provisions for a micro SD card. So in terms of the overall build and screen of the phone, it is very typical of a budget device. Not the highest resolution display. You do get a 90Hz, which is nice, and then just your typical plastic build. And when it comes to the performance of the Honor X6b, the phone comes packing a MediaTek Helio G85 processor. And if that sounds familiar, it will be, because it's a chip that's been around for a couple of years. It's been in plenty of phones in the past, namely Motorola's. I think I've used that chip as well. But overall performance from the G85 has been absolutely fine for my typical use. As you may or may not know, I'm not a heavy gamer, I'm not a heavy user or anything like that. So phones coming with processors a bit like this are absolutely fine for my typical use case. But if you're someone that does a lot of gaming, video editing and that sort of stuff, you will probably struggle with the G85. But for those looking for a phone with dependable performance, not the best, the G85 is absolutely fine. Although being a couple of years old, it is a bit of a shame that they use that on a new phone. And that performance is backed with 4 gigs of RAM on this model and 128 gigs of storage, but you can boost that to 6 gigs of RAM with a different variant and up to 256 gigs of storage. So of course, personally, I would go for the model with 6 gigs of RAM if you can. And of course, the memory can be expanded with a micro SD card as well. If 128 gigs or 256 gigs is not going to be enough for you, you do have that option as well. And as for software on the Honor X6b, you get Android 14 with Magic OS version 8 on top. And of course, Magic OS is like it is on other Honor devices. You get the usual customization options with themes and wallpapers. And Magic OS is one of my preferred skins to use, along with One UI and of course stock Android. I don't find there to be huge amounts of bloatware on the phone. There's a couple of the odd apps here and there, and then of course you've got Honor's own apps on there, but they don't take away from the overall experience. The customization options are still there. Overall, my software experience with the Honor X6b has been absolutely fine. New Android 14 with nice new security patches as well. How many more software updates you're likely to get on the Honor X6b, I'm not 100% sure. A lot of companies are now promising 2 years of major OS updates, even on some of their budget devices. So hopefully Honor will be committing to that sort of support with the Honor X6b. But overall, software experience for me has been absolutely fine. Let me know down in the comments if you are a fan of Magic OS or if you prefer another skin or just stock Android. And when it comes to the battery life, this is where I find budget Honor devices perform really, really well. You get a massive 5,200 milliamp hour battery inside the Honor X6b, and pair that with the low power draw of the MediaTek G85, the low resolution 720p display, and you get some stunning battery life. If you're not a heavy user, a little bit like me, you can definitely get 2 full days from this battery, and you do get fast-ish 35-watt charging, which is pretty good for a budget phone that costs just 100 quid. You get yourself topped up relatively quickly. But yes, 2 days of battery life if you're not a heavy user is no problem for the Honor X6b. It's one of the better features of this phone. And lastly, if I just talk about the dual camera system on the back of the Honor X6b, you get a 50 megapixel f1.8 primary camera, and that is backed with just a 2 megapixel depth camera. So you don't get the macro camera that you find on the Honor X6, but to me, that's not a big deal. I really hate those macro cameras. A depth camera, at least it has some sort of use, of course, when it comes to portrait shots, giving you that nice blurred background. And then that 50 megapixel camera is a nice high resolution camera. And as for the performance of this 50 megapixel camera, it's about what you would expect from a £100 phone. In good conditions, it will get you some nice detailed photos with nice color reproduction. Flipping on that AI mode will get you some enhanced saturation, but overall, it's a competent camera in daylight. Now, when it comes to lower light situations, that's where it's a different conversation. A lot of these cameras are really small camera sensors, so anytime that the lighting drops, the quality of the photos deteriorates quite quickly, and that is certainly the case with the Honor X6b. But if you're someone that wants to use a camera mainly for daylight photos, it will get you some pretty decent snaps with good detail. And the use of that depth camera helps with portrait mode, offering some nice subject separation for your portrait shots. Overall, it's a okay camera system in broad daylight. Lower light situations, I wouldn't even bother. Now, when it comes to the selfie camera, unfortunately, that is just a 5 megapixel selfie camera. And again, only in the brightest of conditions have I found that this camera produces half decent photos. But of course, again, in ever so slightly lower light situations, grain, noise comes into the photos very, very quickly. But in really bright conditions on a bright sunny day, you'll get some pretty decent photos. And again, subject separation in those portrait shots is all right from this selfie camera. Again, not the best, you can't expect the best, but it does a pretty decent job. And in video mode, tops out at 1080p at 30 FPS on both cameras. And this is just typical budget quality video, nothing to write home about. But here are a few more photo and video samples coming from the Honor X6b. Let me know down in the comments what you think. So overall, that's my look at the new Honor X6b, and overall it's a pretty decent phone. I've had no issues in my everyday use with this phone. Performance has been pretty reliable for my use. Battery has been absolutely stunning. Camera, I mean, I didn't set my expectations very high anyway, so the camera is what I'd expect it to be. The software experience is fine. I really like using Magic OS. The 90 Hz refresh rate is a really nice addition to this phone. And for just 100 quid, I don't think you can complain that much. And I don't normally buy phones in black, but the main reason I did with this Honor X6b is because around the camera there's a nice sort of gold accent around the camera, which I actually really like. I didn't really notice it too much in the photos on the green model, but in this black has been fine. It's a nice matte black finish, so fingerprints aren't really that noticeable. Overall, it's a really nice phone, and for 100 quid, yes, there probably are better options, but for those that like using Honor phones and that just wants a phone that will work, will get you good battery life, decent performance, and a nice enough screen, the X6b is a good option.